Chase all this bread, though the shit won't last. About to shut the city down like a crypto crash.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Okay. Ready?
Fucking thing sucks! We'll do it live. Okay.
Join me and many others at Bitcoin 2025 in Las Vegas at the Venetian on May 27th through 29th. You can get 10% off your passes using promo code RICE at checkout. The Bitcoin conference is the largest gathering of Bitcoiners in the US. I've attended the past 4 years. It never disappoints and it only gets better. Check out their website linked in the video description for more information, featured speakers, agenda, and hotel bundles. Get your passes before the price increases. Use promo code RICE at checkout to save 10% off your passes, and it's a way to support Rice TVX. Can't hear you. I think you're muted.
I was trying to impersonate you. Use Rice TVX at checkout to get 10% off.
Yeah, it sounds really fucking nerdy, doesn't it?
That
was me.
What's
that was more
on,
my
bro?
Professional voice. Not much, man. Good seeing you. How you been?
Long time no see, Mr. MF Rice.
Yes, yeah, motherfucking Rice
got a
in the
new
house.
name. What's the MF for?
Motherfucking Rice.
okay.
What's
so
good, my
we got
friend? How you been?
Good, man. I've been good, staying busy. We've got the Fed rate decision coming up right now. Let's get Maddie in, our special guest. For those that may
Mr.
have not
Monty
known.
Greenspan, the founder and CEO of Quantum Economics. How you doing, sir?
I'm having a good day. Yourselves?
Good. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get into it and see what they
too,
let's see what they said, and then we'll come back to the stream.
Well, real quick, what are you guys predicting? Is there a prediction here? Just real quick. Blood.
Rate cuts this year.
Nope.
Jobs market would get weaker, and we really hadn't seen that. So I think there was we had a really strong fourth quarter that boosted interest rates higher. That kept the jobs market really strong. But the important point here, Brian, is all of that is starting to fade right now, and it's a question of does that continue, and that's what we're going to try to find out.
Well, we're going to find out here in about 10 seconds because that's when the Fed decision is coming out again. No change expected, but it's what they say, and we'll give you the rundown. Kelly gave it to you just at the top of the show. We are seeing markets that are higher, at least for now. Maybe not Microsoft, but the Dow is up about 0.25%. The NASDAQ, the big winner, 0.7%, and a 10-year bond yield at 4.3%. Let's go right now to Steve Leisman in D.C.
The Federal Reserve keeping interest rates unchanged at 4.25 to 4.5%. But it makes a point of saying that uncertainty around the economic outlook has increased, and the Fed says it is attentive to risks on both sides of its mandate. in a move that we will be debating. It removed the statement saying that risks to its dual mandate are roughly in balance. That came out of the statement this time. On the Fed's projections, it boosted core inflation to 2.8% for 2025 from 2.5%, so 0.3 up. By the way, exactly mirroring the CNBC Fed survey. It kept 2026 at 2.2 and same for 2027 at 2%, suggesting the Fed either thinks it will control inflation through its policy or that any tariff issues will pass through. It did reduce its growth forecast all the way down to 1.7 for this year from 2.1%. And by 0.2% in 2026. So the Fed does see a weakening impulse coming to economic growth. However, in answer to the discussion you were just having, it really kept the unemployment outlook very much unchanged. Only a 10th increase in the unemployment forecast. So now you're wondering what they do with rates. They kept the 2 rate cuts in place for 2025, but the dot plot is a touch more hawkish, and I will go over that in just a second. I want to tell you the news on the balance sheet, for which there is some. They reduced the runoff of treasuries down to $5 billion monthly from $25 billion. They kept the mortgage-backed security runoff at $35 billion. Governor Waller, he dissented, very technical dissent actually. He agreed with the idea of not to change rates, but he did not want to change or reduce the balance sheet runoff. On the economy, they say it's expanding at a solid pace. They say unemployment has stabilized, but inflation remains somewhat elevated. Now, let me give you the hawkish tilt inside this dot plot here. 4 of the 19 officials wanted no rate cuts, compared to only 1 in the December forecast. 4 see only 1 cuts, and 9 see 2 cuts. What's gone is the kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, the dovish wing of the committee here, where there were 5 people who were looking for 75 basis points of cuts this year. Now there are only 2. So a kind of compression here, leaving the top where it was and some of the bottom coming up. A little bit more hawkish here, but the median still maintaining a forecast or an outlook, not a promise, but an outlook for 2 rate cuts this year. Guys, back to you.
So, Steve.
Okay.
All right.
Marty, what do you think, man?
That's a lot to take in there.
Yeah, it looks like the Fed is they're kind of, well, the key word here is uncertainty, and that's what the markets have been feeling for the last few months, especially with so much going on in the Trump presidency, supposedly, quote unquote trade war happening, and the tariffs, and all the stuff that's happening with Doge. There's a lot less going in. There's a lot less money flowing into the markets these days. So less government spending, and also the Fed's balance sheet has been unwinding, absolutely dropping since 2022. And from what I understood just now, he's saying that the Fed is going to slow that pace down because it is harming the economy. That seemed like a positive to me. We saw a lot of volatility in the markets as a result, some spikes on the short term. But I mean, all in all, I mean, this isn't a groundbreaking meeting. Nothing's really changed as expected. Nobody's expecting any interest rate cuts for at least a few months. So,
well, with you saying that, the next Fed meeting is May, the beginning of May, and we got 6 more meetings after this one. When are you anticipating just that they would drop rates if you're saying a couple? Okay.
Well, I can see it on
obviously just a guesstimate here. I'm not holding you down to nothing here.
I'm not a freaking predictor or something, but the markets have their own opinions about these type of things. You can see my screen here.
The CME tool?
The CME has these futures, Fed futures funds, which kind of predict that movement in May, 15%, which is not enough for an actual cut to happen. In the June meeting is a 50-50 right now. So probably by July, we'll get at least 1 cut. I've been hearing people say that, like, if we get a whole point cut off, we could be seeing Bitcoin at 150,000. So chance of that happening by the end of the year is about 10.5% at the moment. So not not an incredible fat chance of that happening.
What you said though kind of gives me the idea that we could kind of remain sideways in markets until kind of like midsummer and then pick back up, and that would take us potentially into Q4 for Bitcoin hitting the top of this on this bull cycle before we end. If we're in a traditional 4-year cycle, we end that cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of this, I mean, to me, is short-term pain for long-term gain. Is basically, these are Trump's policies in action. He's cutting out the fat. You know, if you're cutting out government spending, obviously there's less money in the market, and that's going to hurt a lot of people. But ultimately, that's very good for the economy because it means less waste of the resources that you have, and less, you know, inflation, and those are ultimately good things for everybody.
No, I agree. What do you think, Blood?
It was just interesting to me to see that 4 out of the 19 didn't want a pause, or no, they didn't want a pause. So were the other 15 wanting a rate cut or a rate hike? I don't think we got that
about
information.
the Fed? Are you talking about like the Fed chairs?
Yeah. Only 4 of them wanted to
Increase or decrease?
Not pause. No,
I mean,
4 didn't want to.
It was a couple weeks ago. The Atlanta Fed had their the report come out that they changed a couple times talking about the U.S. economy shrinking and stuff. So it definitely seems like not every branch of the Federal Reserve is kind of like on point.
I just don't, you know, they said that GDP, they did reduce GDP forecast by, I want to say maybe 0.4. I can't remember. It was small. No, the I don't know. I think it was just in general, the actual committee. But the thing is, are they taking into consideration the tariffs? Because I've seen some tariff calculations taking a hit on GDP, like taking us negative.
Right.
So it's interesting that they only took us down to 1.7 in the forecast.
Nobody really knows what the impact of the tariffs is going to be. You can only really guess. You can only kind of make an educated guess. And you know, people who like to analyze these type of things, that like they put these spreadsheets up, but there's just way too many variables, and the future is so uncertain right now. And you can say, like, even if you were certain, like, what the tariff is, because that's one variable you don't know, like, because the tariffs can change, and you know, this is
and they have we've seen that, right? And Canada was. Yeah, and then Trump. Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
so,
but he's saying he's holding strong now. He's saying he's not going to waver.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what he's been saying.
April 2nd, we'll see what actually happens. So April 2nd, we will know.
The day after April Fool's Day, ironically.
Right.
And that cost us a lot of money to move it one day. It cost us a lot of money to move it one day, ladies and gentlemen.
Even if we know the amount of the level of the tariffs, I mean, you still won't be able to predict what the impacts are going to be. And especially when you pair it with everything else that's going on in the economy and the deregulation and everything like that, it's just a lot of uncertainty. And that's why the yield curve is flat right now. I mean, it's basically saying that investors don't know. They just don't know. And
people don't want to accept the reality that we're going into a recession, and they're in denial.
No,
it seems like
we've been in a recession, Rice. We've been in a recession.
But people are in
since October
denial.
of 2023.
People are in denial.
We've been in a recession since 2022. It's
yeah. You can take the 2 negative prints. You can go from that. I'm giving them a little, a grace. I'll give you nice. 2000. Yeah, I'm being nice. October 2023. But yes, I agree, Marty. I agree. 2022. But with that being said, though, how long do recessions usually last? Not 2 years, 3 years max, right? So we should technically be coming out of a recession.
But everything was artificial before we went into the recession. So it's like you can't. It's like all rules are off the table at this point because you're in unknown. I feel like it's unknown territory. We know we're in a recession, But the length of it, I don't know that we can judge the past and use those as references for the present because of the situation being so different.
Yeah,
I mean, we're at the end of this fiat cycle. We've been talking about this. I mean, it definitely seems to be kind of a push in a sense too, to kind of get us into that new electronic element, bringing in stable coins to replace ultimately physical cash. Right. And it's being accelerated right now. And it's the reason it's being accelerated. We've been seeing it, but it's picking up further and further and further and faster pace because we're past the end is basically the point. And everything's on life support and we're about to run out of electricity is the way I look at it. So you can keep something on life support, but if there's nothing that's got the life support on life support or giving power to the life support, it's dead.
So the way I like to see it is, as far as we've been in a bubble over the last decade or so with all of the money printing. So from like 2018, and I forget the exact numbers, but from around 2018 until about 2021, through COVID, they printed more money than has been printed in the last 200 years, or some such ridiculous figures like this, which obviously created these huge bubbles in the market. And the bubble didn't exactly pop and everything went back to zero immediately, right? They actually just they were skilled enough to let that deflate slowly, and that's what's been happening over time. So what Trump's trying to do is to squeeze all the rest of that air out. Okay.
Right.
And then once we have that, we can start to inflate the bubble with good air, right? With positive value creation. And that is what I believe as far as with technology, less government. And I think that, these are the teachings of Milton Friedman in action, right? Is basically, less of a strain on society. Government tends to overregulate. They tend to harm businesses. And when we take all of that out of the picture, we're going to have, an unrestrained period of growth. And when other countries see that, they're going to follow suit. We have an amazing case of, Argentina with Javier Milei starting over a year ago with his deregulation campaign. Which is going very well. He was able to take Argentina out of like one of the deepest, darkest holes an economy's ever been in, and actually back into the black in just a year, just by getting rid of those bad actors. We see Nayib Bukele, doing amazing things as far as the adoption of Bitcoin and cleaning up, El Salvador. And then we see, leaders like Giorgio Meloni and in Italy, and over the next few years, let's say, any democracy, that actually has free and fair elections, are going to see the results of Trump and these other leaders. And I say we want less government too, and that's what's going to happen. And I believe that with the technology that's coming out these days, blockchain, AI, and quantum computing, we are entering a golden era that could literally last for hundreds of years. Okay,
so when you say golden era, what are the ramifications of this AI, quantum computing, blockchain implementation within society? That's structural unemployment. Like, I think at levels we've never seen. Meaning we'll be taking people out of the workforce and they'll be never coming back at levels we've never seen. So I just wonder how that plays out. If this is the golden era, what do those non-working people do?
Your argument there was the same argument of, the Irish factories when they first built them, and they're like, oh my gosh, they're going to put us all out of work. But and it is short-term pain, but it goes for long-term gain, because eventually people get better jobs. You have to look at the economy as something that's producing all of the time, and it's producing wealth, it's producing goods and services. And who's the benefactor of those goods and services? the humans, us, all of us. How is it distributed? That's a different story. Now, I believe that eventually we'll be able to get to a point in technology where we'll have a simple utopia like they have in Star Trek, right?
Where there's no need for money.
Don't need money because you have everything.
Okay.
The simulator just creates.
That's like the perfect society.
Yeah, I
we
believe
have
that's
free energy,
I believe
no
that's where we're
money.
going.
People can just live a life that's fulfilling.
Now, that's the key, though,
arts.
Rice. The government has to allow the proliferation of this new technology that's old. It's been here since the 1940s or even earlier.
Come out.
But the 0 point technology has to come out. We have to have free energy in order to say everyone can just go out and do whatever they want. Because right now they have the system set up and designed to be a system of struggling and competing for resources, limited resources. You take away the energy, which is the crux of the whole limited resources equation, then we could do that. But until then, if they're going to keep playing this game, Rice, I don't see it happening.
Check it out. If you guys haven't seen it, check out this documentary. It just came out recently. It's called The Lost Century and How to Reclaim It. It's Stephen Greer.
I've heard of that. Yeah, Stephen Greer. I've seen that.
And it also has some narration from Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit. Because he has like a UFO
he's deep into
conspiracy podcast.
Yeah, he's deep into
I haven't listened to his podcast, but he's got a podcast. So that came out and that explained, and it's like the Lost Century and how to reclaim it. And basically what it does is it's explaining all the suppressed technology, how the government has taken patents, just completely proven the fact that there is this freer energy that's available is being suppressed by the same fucking people, like basically that from the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution. Those families are trying to continue to benefit from that antiquated bullshit while keeping society, in a sense, limited. It's kind of crazy, man, because if you just think about what you just said, Monty, that completely takes care of hunger. You know, and you have no need for war if there's no money and there's no reason for people to fight over resources. So it's interesting to think about. I think it'll take us a while to get there, though. I don't think people mentally are prepared to self-govern themselves in a sense and be fully responsible people and fully treat each other how we want to be treated. I don't think we're quite there yet with the evolution of our species, but
we can get there in a day.
That'd be great.
I believe that it's a matter of a catalyst that brings everybody back to, you know, what's important, and treating others with kindness is not foreign concept to most people. I think that, it's something that I think with one simple event or even a sound bite, people can understand that it's in their own best interest, to behave,
be a good person.
And to be exactly to treat each other fairly.
So I've got a question for both of you from a viewer here. Do you think they will keep the debt or wipe it away when the switch to digital currencies occur?
I don't think we're going to see a debt reset or a jubilee of that, because I think I just don't see that happening. I mean, they would have to completely end the Federal Reserve and the central banking completely, and then just basically say we're not paying it because they don't exist, in that sense. But I don't know.
Well, Trump is trying to eliminate income tax. He's trying to, he's saying that the tariffs will come in, and
that's funny. I wanted to ask you, Marty, about that. And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you, because the caveat to that, the only way he's going to be able to do that is he says if he, what does he say? Balance the budget. Is that really going to? Do you see Trump balancing the budget? I don't see.
When we say balancing the budget, are we talking about the debt clock going to zero?
No.
Okay, because that would take all the money out of the system, and it will all be gone if you paid off all the debt.
Right.
Yeah. So no, and I appreciate the question from the audience, but what Trump's trying to do, as far as like Bitcoin is concerned, is put some Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And that over time will have a positive effect on the balance sheet. So what you mean when we're talking about balancing the budget? Yeah, the government is what, like 35 trillion dollars in debt or something like that.
37, yeah.
Is to make that start to go down instead of up. That's all
Right,
that.
right,
Making
right.
sure
So that means like every year, I think we're doing 2 trillion, right? So he's saying if we get it to where we're doing 0 or negative, then that's a balanced budget. I still don't even see us getting there, Amadi, because with the continuing resolution that's being passed, looks like it's going to get passed, Rice.
Yeah, well, we're
They're going to
raising
increase
the rate, increase
4
the,
trillion.
That's what Massey is bitching about, and everybody's, Trump's coming out against.
And I'm with Massey on that.
Where he's saying you're talking about reducing waste, but
he's right, bro.
But raising the government spending. Like,
I'm sorry, I'm a Trump supporter.
It doesn't make sense.
But it does not make sense.
Thank you, B.
It does not make sense.
Marty, have you ever read the book? I haven't read it, but I was recently turned on by about it by somebody. The Black Swan, some economic book by Nassim Taleb, I think it's.
Yeah, I read the Cliff Notes on that one. Yeah.
So somewhere apparently in that book it mentions like the government starting strategic reserves so that they could use that strategic reserve to collateralize for loans. Is this something have you thought about this or heard anything about this? Because I hadn't thought about that before, but that would if they were going to do something like that, it would make sense just to get collateralized loans on our gold instead of selling the gold and then buy the Bitcoin instead of selling gold to buy Bitcoin. Because that's what there is saying they want to do, because the gold that's in the Federal Reserve and Treasury's possession is valued at the certificates are valued at $42 an ounce. So they would revalue them and be reissued with the current rate, which shout out to gold for hitting all-time highs and staying above 3K. Yeah. I've always been a strong proponent of the precious metals. It's a slow one, but it's a way of preserving your wealth.
And I've been trading gold since I was a kid, man. So it's
I think the Black Swan movie you're talking about is not the same as the book. The book is an economic movie, and I think the Black Swan movie was about a ballerina or something. Maybe
that's right. Yeah, no, it's different. Definitely different story. Your audience is wild, man. Somebody said I'm crack. I'm just trying to have a conversation and answer the questions.
Oh yeah, that's my guy, Wisdom Bars. He's a hooligan.
Yeah, we got some interesting. We got some interesting fam in the house, man.
So I'll be just tell your boy, watch Milton Friedman on YouTube. Just watch a few hours of that shit, and you will be higher than me on this. Okay, reducing government spending is the easiest path to prosperity that has ever come, especially for a nation as wealthy as the United States in resources and in brain power. It is literally the panacea. It's like it's
bringing Austrian economics into play versus the Keynesian economics is what we've been kind of dealing with.
Yeah,
Milton Friedman comes from that school, right? The Austrian school.
Exactly. It's pure capitalism. It's right. Each person,
free market capitalism,
in his own best interest, is going to bring up the rest of the system with him. And the more regulation you put, if you try and increase a minimum wage, or if you try to make things more eco-friendly, or if you try to whatever the government is trying to do, eventually ends up backfiring, and we can see it. So I believe that, as far as the levels of corruption that have been in the government, I think we've seen a huge monumental peak over the last few years, where politicians are intentionally diverting funds towards friends and relatives and things like that. And and just making, lining their pockets. I mean, just the numbers don't add up. I mean, a congressperson, making $200,000 a year should not have wealth of, millions of
20
dollars.
million, $30 million.
It doesn't make any sense. The
Doesn't make any
numbers
sense.
don't add up. Something is wrong, and it's like, what exactly, if we're going to follow the money, we're going to figure that out within the next few months. And where do you think that those millions come from? They come from you. They come from your taxes. They come or either from your taxes or from inflation, which is a hidden tax on you. So I believe that cutting that kind of shit out is gonna return the money to the people, and is gonna make us all more prosperous.
Man, I really honestly wasn't expecting this much positivity out of you today, man. But it's like what you're saying makes every bit of sense. And I'm glad we got you on for this. I appreciate you taking time to do it. I want to remind people that are watching, if you guys haven't taken an opportunity to smash that like button, be sure to do so. Blood and I are both streaming on our YouTube channels, our X accounts. Make sure you repost if you're watching on X. It'd be great. And follow us both on the X. We have our links down below in each other's video description. Where are we at with Chirp House, sir? Mr. Blood? Mr. Red Nugent?
He's going to be on in 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's about 2 minutes. He should be on.
Okay.
So we got a minute. I just don't think, Marty, that like if Trump signs this resolution bill, then it takes us $4 trillion back. It's a $4 trillion step backwards.
Maybe he's
Doge
got.
can
Maybe
only.
I mean, he might have a reason for doing this in a plan. Like, I don't know what his.
No, there's no. There can't be, bro.
We're definitely not seeing the end of the Federal Reserve.
I don't see tariffs filling that gap. I just don't see it.
I don't know. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be, we don't know what's going to happen with a lot of this stuff. So, but I think a lot of, you've seen people ask JD Vance and Trump in interviews about recessions, and both of them want to say, I don't want to predict stuff. I mean, you have, I think it was Scott Bessent, the head of the Treasury, that has come out and said that the economy's not looking good. Paraphrasing.
He's a hard listen, man.
But I'm just saying,
he's a hard listen. That guy, when he talks,
but there are government officials basically saying, in a way, without saying it, that shit doesn't look good right now, and we're trying to fix it.
I'm smoking on a Davidoff Nicaraguan.
The resolution bill, basically to resolve a government shutdown. That's just the budget, right?
The spending budget.
Well, it's the spending budget. So then he's going to increase it $4 trillion.
He's going to increase it, or it's going to be $4 trillion?
Well, it wasn't $4 trillion before, so he's increasing.
Yeah, he's increasing. $4 trillion less, whatever it was.
Zero.
He's giving it. He's giving it another
$4 trillion. That doesn't make any sense. The number is $4 trillion. About how much they're going to spend. But what was it?
Yeah, but we know they're going to run that right to the $4 trillion and come back next year and do the same thing. This is what they do.
Okay, well, it's saying in the fiscal year 2024, the U.S. federal government spent $6.9 trillion with Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare being the largest spending categories.
So $4 trillion is a huge decrease.
If it's only $4 trillion, I don't know if he's talking about increasing it by an additional $4 trillion. I think that's what's being said, which would put it around the $10 trillion area.
No, that doesn't make any sense.
But and the crazy thing is, the $6.9 trillion is 24% of the GDP.
No, Rice. No, Marty's right that it's a decrease from 6 to 4. However, it's still high. A positive delta. It's still another high. $4 trillion. Right. The bill should be a continuing resolution, should be a stopping resolution. We should not increase it by any trillions of dollars. It should be zero.
But it's not an increase, Blood. That's what he's saying. It's not an increase, it's a decrease. The government has to spend some money, right? The government has to spend money. They're a government. They have bills to pay. There's a military. There's all of those there's government employees, government contracts. They have to spend money. But
I'm going to cut you here, Marty, because we got Jay Powell. We'll resume in a second.
Labor market conditions are solid, and inflation has moved closer to our 2% longer run goal. though it remains somewhat elevated. In support of our goals, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged. We also made the technical decision to slow the pace of decline in the size of our balance sheet. I'll have more to say about these decisions after briefly reviewing economic developments.
That's good for the economy.
Economic activity continued to expand at a solid pace in the fourth quarter of last year, with GDP rising at 2.3%. Recent indications, however, point to a moderation in consumer spending following the rapid growth seen over the second half of 2024. Surveys of households and businesses point to heightened uncertainty about the economic outlook. It remains to be seen how these developments might affect future spending and investment. In our summary of economic projections, the median participant projects GDP to rise 1.7% this year, somewhat lower than projected in December, and to rise a bit below 2% over the next 2 years. In the labor market, conditions remain solid. Payroll job gains averaged 200,000 per month over the past 3 months. The unemployment rate at 4.1% remains low and is held in a narrow range for the past year. The jobs to workers gap has held steady for several months. Wages are growing faster than inflation and at a more sustainable pace than earlier in the pandemic recovery. Overall, a wide set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are broadly in balance. The labor market is not a source of significant inflationary pressures. The median projection for the unemployment rate in the SEP is 4.4% at the end of this year and 4.3% over the next 2 years. Inflation has eased significantly over the past 2 years, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.5% over the 12 months ending in February, and that excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.8%. Some near-term measures of inflation expectations have recently moved up. We see this in both market and survey-based measures, and survey respondents, both consumers and businesses, are mentioning tariffs as a driving factor. Beyond the next year or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 2.7% this year and 2.2% next year, a little higher than projected in December. In 2027, the median projection is at our 2% objective. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 4.25% to 4.5%. Looking ahead, the new administration is in the process of implementing significant policy changes in 4 distinct areas: trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. It is the net effect of these policy changes that will matter for the economy and for the path of monetary policy. While there have been recent developments in some of these areas, especially trade policy, uncertainty around the changes and their effects on the economic outlook is high. As we parse the incoming information, we're focused on separating the signal from the noise as the outlook evolves. As we say in our statement, in considering the extent and timing of additional adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. We do not need to be in a hurry to adjust our policy stance, and we are well positioned to wait for greater clarity. In our SEP, FOMC participants wrote down their individual assessments of an appropriate path for the federal funds rate based on what each participant judges to be the most likely scenario going forward. An admittedly challenging exercise at this time in light of considerable uncertainty. The median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 3.9% at the end of this year and 3.4% at the end of next year, unchanged from December. While these individual forecasts are always subject to uncertainty, as I noted, uncertainty today is unusually elevated. And of course, these projections are not a committee plan or a decision. Policy is not on a preset course. As the economy evolves, we will adjust our policy stance in a manner that best promotes our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains strong and inflation does not continue to move sustainably toward 2%, we can maintain policy restraint for longer. If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly or inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we can ease policy accordingly. Our current policy stance is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face in pursuing both sides of our dual mandate. At today's meeting, we also decided to slow the pace of decline in our balance sheet. Since we began balance sheet runoff, our securities holdings have declined by more than $2 trillion. While market indicators continue to suggest that the quantity of reserves remains abundant, we have seen some signs of increased tightness in money markets. Beginning in April, the monthly cap on Treasury redemptions will be lowered from $25 billion to $5 billion. Consistent with the committee's intention to hold primarily Treasury securities in the longer run, we are leaving the cap on agency securities unchanged. This action has no implications for our intended stance of monetary policy and should not affect the size of our balance sheet over the medium term. The committee also continued its discussions as part of our 5-year review of our monetary policy framework. At this meeting, we focused on labor market dynamics and our maximum employment goal. As we have indicated, our review will include outreach and public events involving a wide range of parties, including Fed Listens events around the country and a research conference in May. Throughout this process, we will be open to new ideas and critical feedback, and we will take on board lessons of the last 5 years in determining our findings. We intend to wrap up the review by late summer. The Fed has been assigned 2 goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. We remain committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation sustainably to our 2% goal, and keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I will look forward to your questions.
They're in a holding pattern.
Howard Schneider with Reuters. Thanks for your time.
Can you turn the volume down
two
that
things on
bit?
sort of the real side here, inflation and then GDP. How much of the higher inflation forecast for this year is due to tariffs? And since the policy path remains the same, are you effectively reading this as a one-time price level shock?
That's really what he's trying to do here.
Okay, so
what do you
how much of
say,
it
Marty?
is tariff? So let me say that it
He's
is
trying to wait out the uncertainty.
going to be very difficult to have a precise
He's
assessment.
just trying to like wait it out, not do anything drastic. In the meantime, hold off. But in the meantime, he is offloading the Fed's balance sheet. We'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariffed and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it. A good part of it is coming from tariffs, but we'll be working, and so will other forecasters, to try to find the best possible way to separate non-tariff inflation from tariff inflation. In terms of your sort of looking through question, too soon to say about that. As I've mentioned, it can be the case that it's appropriate sometimes to look through inflation if it's going to go away quickly without action by us, if it's transitory, and that can be the case in the case of tariff inflation. I think that would depend on the tariff inflation moving through fairly quickly, and it would depend critically as well on inflation expectations being well anchored, longer term inflation expectations being well anchored.
Well, I guess I'm looking at the out years here, and the fact that the policy path doesn't change at all, and inflation is unchanged in the out years also, doesn't that imply you all have basically decided that there is no signal here and that it's just we're back to transitory again?
So I think that's kind of the base case, but as I said, we really can't know that. We're going to have to see how things actually work out. And the fact that there wasn't much change, I think that's partly because you see weaker growth but higher inflation. They kind of offset, and also frankly a little bit of inertia when it comes to changing something in this highly uncertain environment. I think there's a level of inertia where you just say, maybe I'll stay where I am.
Thank
It's
you. Holly
interesting
Smith of the
because
New
he's
York
like,
Times. You just described inflation expectations as well anchored, but has your confidence in that assessment changed at all, given the increase in certain measures and the high degree of uncertainty expressed by businesses, households, and forecasters?
So on inflation expectations, of course, we do monitor inflation expectations very, very carefully, basically every source we can find, and short-term, long-term, households, businesses, forecasters, market-based. And I think the picture broadly is this. You do see increases widely in short-term inflation expectations, and people who fill out surveys and answer questionnaires are pointing to tariffs about that. If you look in the survey world, if you look a little further out, you really don't see much in the way of an increase. Longer-term inflation expectations are mostly well anchored. If you look at the New York, for example, then you have market-based, and it's the same pattern. People in markets are pricing in break-evens. Some higher inflation over the next year must be related to
spending, less government spending, and the Fed reducing their balance sheet is going to, I believe, bring inflation to zero.
That would be interesting. I mean, do you have like a time frame for something like that?
But
like what?
A year? It depends how long it takes Musk to get rid of all of that excess spending. I think he was given 500 days. Was it?
Yeah, 2 years or something like that. But the thing is, it's I mean, $1 trillion is probably what they'll find, is what I'm hearing. So that's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I mean,
$1 trillion is not a drop in anybody's bucket. Honestly, I would love to have a bucket that big.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I would too.
Well, when we spend $3 billion a day in the U.S.
Yeah. So Musk's forecast before the election was that he could cut the budget by $2 trillion, and that's what it looks like is happening over here.
Somehow you're starting to like sound all spacey. We got a little echo thing going.
Yeah,
I got it on my end too. That's weird.
Not me.
That is so weird. Checkity check. Yeah, we're like in space, man.
You still hear it?
I hear it in my ear. Very lightly. Marty?
I hear
downbeat things about the economy and then going out and buying a new car. But we don't know that will be the case here. We will be watching very carefully for signs of weakness in the real data. Of course we will. But given where we are, we think our policy's in a good place to react to what comes, and we think that the right thing to do is to wait here for greater clarity about what the economy is doing.
Nick Timmeros, The Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, Chair Greenspan once defined price stability as an environment in which inflation is so low and stable over time that it doesn't materially enter into the decisions of households.
Gold's up like 13%.
Can you say that today, that we have that
today?
If I'm reading this correctly, yeah.
When you see buy in advance psychology, big changes in inventories and
10%.
surveys
No, that
that show
doesn't make
consumers,
sense.
at least in the short run,
It's up
expect higher
$13.50, not
$13.
So I do like that
not
definition a lot. In
13%.
fact, I used it at the recent conference where I spoke.
That's what I was thinking, but it
I
didn't
think a
look
world
right when I was
where
looking
people
at
can
the
make their
numbers.
daily
It was
economic decisions and businesses, and they're not
$3,058
having to think about the possibility of significant
Still holding
high
above
inflation.
3, though.
We know inflation will bounce around. That is price stability.
I think it's going to go higher,
I think we were
honestly.
getting closer and closer to that. I wouldn't say we were at that. The inflation was running around 2.5% for some time. I do think with the arrival of the tariff inflation, further progress may be delayed. The SEP doesn't really show further downward progress on inflation this year, and that's really due to the tariffs coming in. So delayed, but if you look at our forecasts, we do see ourselves getting back into the low 2s in 26 and then down to 2 by 27, of course, highly uncertain. So I see progress having been made towards that, and then progress in the future. I think that progress is probably delayed for the time being.
If that's the case, why are there cuts in the SEP for 2025?
So again, people wrote down 2 cuts the last time, and they look at the they wrote down meaningful decline in growth from 2.1 1 to 1.7 in 2025, a tick up in the unemployment rate, so not much there, but core inflation up by 0.3. And so those kind of balance each other out. So people, not everybody, but on balance, people wrote down similar numbers. The changes aren't that big. The other factor, though, as I mentioned, is just really high uncertainty. What would you write down? I mean, it's really hard to know how this is going to work out. And again, we think our policy is in a good place. We think it's a good place where we can move in the direction where we need to. But in the meantime, it's really appropriate to wait for further clarity. And of course, you know, the costs of doing that, given that the economy is still solid, are very low.
Edward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Edward Lawrence with Fox Business. So with near 4% unemployment rate, that should be low enough to bring people in from the sidelines in terms of hiring. But we're seeing the hiring rates have been stuck at 2023, 2024 levels. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's a feature that has been for some time a feature of this labor market. You have pretty high participation accounting for aging. You've got wages that are consistent with 2% inflation, assuming that we're going to keep getting relatively high productivity. We've got unemployment, pretty close to its natural level. But the hiring rate is quite low, but so is the layoff rate. So you look at initial claims or layoffs, so you're not seeing people losing their jobs, but you're seeing that people who don't have a job having to wait longer and longer. And, the question is, which way does that break? If we were to see a meaningful increase in layoffs, then that would probably translate fairly quickly into...
I don't understand how he's saying he doesn't see jobs, a job labor force being reduced when we're getting huge cuts from the government. And that constitutes a large chunk of our labor force. That's strange.
The last 6, 7, 8 months.
I'm not sure why. Maybe he's not including
there's healthy levels of job creation employees, too. So overall, it's a labor market that's in balance, and we watch it very carefully.
So then, have we seen the new administration's policies in the economic numbers yet? And when do you anticipate that happening?
In labor or in other?
In labor and inflation, just across the economy.
On the Trump administration, and especially business owners, are taking the changes and translating them into great confidence. And that's causing them to go out and hire. So whatever is, being cut from the government is clearly being offset by businesses looking to grow.
How far that will go, we'll find out much more. I mentioned that you saw we've had two very strong goods inflation readings in the last 2 months, which is very unexpected. I think hard to trace it to specific tariffs, but it must have something to do with, it's either noise and it'll come back, and that's very possible too. But if it is persistent, then it must be to do with people buying ahead of tariffs or raising prices ahead of tariffs and things like that. Those kinds of things happen, and they're very, very hard to capture because so much of it is indirect. A great example is their washing machines were tariffed in the last round of tariffs, and prices went up. But prices also went up on dryers, which were not tariffed. So the manufacturers they just kind of followed the crowd and raised it. So things happen very indirectly. And so there'll be a lot of work done in coming months to try to trace all that through. But ultimately, though, it's too soon to be seeing significant effects in economic data.
That's fucked up. They raised the price of dryers.
Craig Torres from Bloomberg News. Thanks, Chair Powell. You said transitory price increases from tariffs are the base case. Transitory is the base case. Wasn't it the base case last time? And didn't the FOMC forecast lower inflation ahead last time? And wasn't the lesson that it quickly got into services, haircuts, daycare, everything else?
Uh-oh.
And so I'm just wondering why the 9 aren't taking that on board and are cutting twice this year.
When you say last time, are you talking about the last...
Pandemic, yes, during the
Because
pandemic.
you could have been talking about the last time there were tariffs, in which case the inflation was transitory.
Paul, he's talking about last time.
Of course, we're well aware of that. And, it's still the truth. If there's an inflationary impulse that's going to go away on its own, it's not the right policy to tighten policy, because by the time you have your effect, you're in effect by design, you are lowering economic activity and employment, And if that's not necessary, you don't want to do it. In real time, as we know, it's hard to make that judgment. And we're well aware, of what happened, obviously, with the pandemic inflation. But I mean, we have to look at this as a different situation. There are differences and similarities. I mean, it's a different time. We haven't had real price stability fully reestablished yet, and we have to keep that in mind. And we hear that people are very reluctant to take on to allow prices to go up. At the same time, we hear that businesses are intending to pass many of these prices through. So it's hard to say how this is going to work out.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Thanks for taking my question, Mr. Chairman. The Bank of Canada, in its last policy statement, said monetary policy cannot offset the impacts of a trade war. What it can and must do is ensure that higher prices do not lead to ongoing inflation. I wonder if that kind of reflects your own sense of prioritization faced with higher prices and weaker growth, that the idea is you have to take care of inflation.
So we have two goals, right? We have maximum employment and price stability, and we have to balance those. And, there can be situations in which they're in tension, right? And we actually have a provision in our consensus statement that says what we should do in that case. That's a very challenging situation for any central bank, and certainly for us. And so what we say that we'll do is we'll look how far each of those two goals is, each of those two measures is from its goal, and then we'll ask how long we think it might take to get back to the goal for each of them, and we'll make a judgment because our tools work in one direction. We're either tightening or loosening. So it's a very challenging situation. Let me say we don't have that situation right now. That's not where the economy is at all. It's also not where the forecast is. I don't know any mainstream forecast that really show significant problems like that.
Well, just to follow up, yesterday,
are we going to listen to all these
UCLA
questions?
Anderson forecast said there's high probability of a recession. Where do you stand on whether or not the slowdown you're seeing creates a higher probability or concern that you may have on recession? Thank you.
There's always an unconditional possibility of a recession. It might be broadly in the range of 1 in 4 at any time. If you look back through the years, it could be within 12 months, a 1 in 4 chance of a recession. So the question is whether this current situation, those possibilities are elevated. I will say this: we don't make such a forecast. If you look at outside forecasts, forecasters have generally raised, a number of them have raised their possibility of a recession somewhat, but still at relatively moderate levels, still in the region of the traditional, because they were extremely low. If you go back 2 months, people were saying that the likelihood of a recession was extremely low. So has moved up, but it's not high.
Chris.
Hi, thank you. Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. As you know, I guess last night, President Trump fired 2 members of the Federal Trade Commission, an independent agency, and this could cause the kind of legal fight about the administration's power to fire independent people. If those firings stand, is that a threat to the Fed's independence? Could he do the same thing to the Fed board?
So I think I did answer that question in this very room some time ago, and I no desire to change that answer, and have nothing new for you on that today.
Powell scared.
Well, okay. Well, maybe I'll have another mulligan.
He doesn't want to comment on it. They're all laughing like it's funny.
I wanted to go back to the consumer sentiment, particularly the inflation expectations in the University of Michigan survey. In the summer of 2022, you cited the rise in the long-term inflation expectations in that index as the reason that you went big with a 3/4 point hike. So I know you've talked about all the different measures now, but you seem to not be placing the same weight on that. And so I'm just wondering, are you dismissing what we saw last week from the University of Michigan, or does that carry the same weight as it did in the past?
So I mentioned it back then, but in no way did I place a huge weight on it. I think that was a ex post story, but it wasn't the case. That was a preliminary reading, and so is this. And it's also, this is that Michigan, the one you're referring to, the longer term thing. We look at it, we don't dismiss data that we don't like, we force ourselves to look at it, but it is an outlier compared to market-based and compared to other survey-based assessments of longer run inflation expectations. So we got to keep that in mind. And I I would just say we look at all of them, and that one's kind of an outlier, but nonetheless we take notice of it.
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Radio and Television. There's a worry on Wall Street that when you say you want to study the net effect of the fiscal policies we may see on the economy, that you would end up waiting too long and be behind the curve in responding to any downturn. How can you reassure people that you can spot a problem early enough unless you decide to be preemptive?
Yeah, look, we're aware of we're well aware of how things are going to evolve and the timeframes and all that. And we will use our tools to foster achievement of our goals to the best we can. And of course, we're going to try to be timely with that. For right now, the hard data are pretty solid. We are obviously aware of the soft sentiment data and high uncertainty, and we're watching that carefully, and we think it's a good time for us to wait for further clarity before we consider adjusting our policy stance.
Do you think it's going to be hard to get clarity in a government by tweet? I mean, do you have a feeling that at some point you actually will have a forecast you can trust?
Yes, I think we will. It's hard to say when that will be. These decisions are going to be made, and they're going to be implemented, and then we'll know. At that point, we'll know what the decisions are, and we'll have to make assessments then about the implications for the economy. Those things will happen. A lot of them will happen over the course of.
What'd you say, Marty?
Bitcoin testing 86K.
Rachel. Hi, Chair Powell. Rachel Siegel from the Washington Post. Thank you for taking our questions. At the beginning, you were talking about separating the signal from the noise and tariff inflation from non-tariff inflation. Can you walk us through what that looked like over the last couple of months, if there were specifics from the January meeting to now that helped you make those distinctions?
So when we say separating the signal from the noise, that's just a way of saying that things are highly uncertain and that, you're reading about developments. The news is full of developments of tariffs being put on and taken off and things like that. Some of that is noise in the sense that it's not really telling you anything. You're trying to extract a signal from that, and the signal is what's going to be the effect on economic activity, on inflation, on employment, and all those things. So that's really when we say signal and noise. Sorry, the second thing was?
Or similarly for tariff inflation, non-tariff inflation, ways that you're making the distinction.
That's sort of a special case of that. The idea being, and I do think that the first 2 months of this year are a great example. You've got high readings for goods inflation after a string of readings that average close to zero, and you have to ask, it's coming during tariffs, but you can't. It's very hard to actually scientifically go back and match up those increases and say, yes, I can prove that that's from tariffs, but it kind of has to be to some extent. Plus noise. There can be idiosyncratic readings in various categories which will shortly reverse, and that happens too, and that could be a big piece of it. I think we'll know in a couple of months. We'll know whether those were, where that really was from. But that's another case where I think it's going to be very, very challenging to unpack the inflation that we see over the course of this year and be able to say with confidence how much of that came from inflation and how much of it, from tariffs and how much of it didn't. But that's what we'll be doing. We'll be doing that, and so will everybody else, and we'll all be trying very hard to make that assessment. And, I'm sure we will make a lot of progress on that, and we already have. But it's going to be a challenge.
Do you have a sense yet as to what, in your mind, would make something cross from noise to a signal, what that threshold would look like?
It would depend on what we're talking about. I mean, obviously, you're looking for direct evidence that particular pieces of inflation are or are clearly not caused by tariffs. For example, if it's something that was, in the service sector that was far away from anything that's tariffed, you might think, okay, well, that is, like, frankly, housing services inflation. Which, by the way, has been behaving well, which for some time was kind of our problem. Now it's slow, but it's definitely, moving down in a very good way.
It's 3 o'clock, man. It's actually 3:01.
To some extent with non-housing services inflation.
Thanks for taking our questions, Chair Powell. Kelly O'Grady, CBS News. So consumer sentiment has dipped dramatically, but you say the economy and the hard data is still solid. What is your message to consumers that clearly disagree and don't feel that strength? Because the hard data they're looking at is their grocery bill.
Okay, so a couple things. The grocery bill is about past inflation, really. There was inflation in 21, 2, and 3, and prices went up. The current level, it's not the change in prices. It's they're unhappy, and they're not wrong to be unhappy that prices went up quite a bit, and they're paying a lot for those things. So I think that is the fundamental fact, and has been for a long time, a couple of years, why people are unhappy with the economy. It's not that the economy is not growing. It's not that inflation is really high. It's not that unemployment is high. It's none of those things. We have, 4.1% unemployment. We've got 2% growth, and it's a pretty good economy. But people are unhappy because of the price level, and we completely understand and accept that.
And just to follow up, why are you still projecting 2 rate cuts this year if your own projections show inflation higher for longer? Does that mean you see a slowdown in economic growth as a real threat?
So I think remember we came into this with, at the December meeting, the median was 2 cuts, the median was. And so you come in and you see, broadly speaking, weaker growth, but higher inflation. And they kind of balance each other out. So you think, and unemployment is there's really only a 1/10 change. So there's just not a big change in the forecast. There really isn't. Modest, meaningfully higher growth and meaningfully higher inflation, which call for different responses, right? So they cancel each other out, and people just said, okay, I'm going to stay here. But the second factor is it's so highly uncertain. Is just, we're sitting here thinking, and we obviously are in touch with businesses and households all over the country. We have an extraordinary network of contacts that come in through the reserve banks and put in the beige book, and also through contacts at the board. And we get all that, and we do understand that sentiment has fallen off pretty sharply, but economic activity has not yet. And so we're watching carefully. So I would tell people that the economy seems to be healthy. We understand that sentiment is quite negative at this time. And that probably has to do with, turmoil at the beginning of an administration that's making, big changes in areas of policy. And that's probably part of it. I do think the underlying unhappiness people have about the economy, though, is more about the price level.
You might be muted.
Yeah, I think this is incredibly positive. The market's taking it positively. Biggest takeaway happened in the first minute of the speech, where he mentioned that they are going to slow the pace of unwinding their balance sheet. And I'm happy to illustrate this point. So the Fed has 2 levers. That's why I call him a liar as well in the middle of the speech, because he said, well, we can either tighten or we can loosen. We can't do both. But actually they can do both, and that's what they have been doing for quite a while now. So the Fed has 2 levers. One is the interest rates, which we saw drop to support the economy in 2020 when COVID hit. They put it on 0 immediately to flow money in, and we all know what happened to asset prices then. And then in 2022, when the inflation started coming, they raised it at the fastest pace in history in order to thwart inflation. And we all know what that did to asset prices. So now they've been lowering interest rates, which is loosening their monetary policy, and talking about continuing to, and that's the most important, is talking about continuing to lower them, which I think he couldn't answer Kelly straight as to why they were doing that. It's actually they're trying to give the impression to the market that interest rates are going lower and not going higher. Because the more they forecast that, the more people say, okay, well, the economy is going to loosen from here. So that's really what they're trying to do with that. The second lever that the Fed has is their balance sheet itself. And this is basically what happens in the first quantitative easing, 2008, 2009. They printed a lot of money all at once. We saw huge levels of in 2014. And then again, here is the 2020, they inflated their balance sheet tremendously. And instead of just like kind of letting that run off, they continued it through 2021. And then 2022 is when they started really to do quantitative tightening. So they are tightening, at the same time as they're loosening. So they're tightening the balance sheet while they're loosening the interest rates. And the biggest takeaway from this is that this line is going to continue going down, but not as steeply.
Right.
So,
you know, all things aren't equal. So which has a more effect on the economy, tightening or lowering interest rates? Because they kind of cancel each other out, right?
that's the Fed's plan. They're straddling right now. That is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to cancel each other out. They're trying to reduce, because they have this massive balance sheet.
Right.
$7 trillion of assets that they have no business holding to begin with. So they're trying to get rid of that, but also there's a very real limit to how far down this can go, because you don't want it at zero ever, because if you're at zero, you can't react to an emergency. Even if you're at 2%, it makes it difficult to react to anything that happens. So if they knock off a whole percentage point here, be at 2.5 at 3.5%. If they knock off 2%, 2.5%, there's no room to react anymore. So they don't want to actually cut, but they want to give the impression that they are cutting, and that's really what affects the market psychology.
Dan, we gotta have this guy on more for these things.
Yeah, I agree. We got about 1,100 people watching right now, so make sure
I like
you guys
Marty's take on this, man. I mean, this is what he does.
Like button. Actually, you got to follow us. There's no like
button. I'm a builder now. I haven't watched the Fed in a while. You guys decided to invite me. I appreciate that, but you know, like literally, the Fed to me is like, yeah, it's good to get the notes. Okay, hear what happened, but I haven't actually sat down and watched the Fed meeting. I think there was probably one in the last year that was actually important to me. But it's good to get back into that sort of stuff. But
Dave Rumbelow mentioned that that Powell really laid heavy on the tariffs. He's blaming a lot of this shit on the tariffs, and a lot of his actions on the tariffs, and what he's going to do is based off what the tariffs are going. But it was interesting that he said that short-term inflation is because of tariffs, but long-term inflation is not a problem.
But that's what's been on the market's mind lately, and that's why not because of, I wouldn't put it on the tariffs that say the tariffs had a direct impact, but what the tariffs are doing is they're causing an uncertainty, right? People don't know how it's
like you said earlier. Yeah, we don't know what the effect of it's going to be.
Word of the day is uncertainty, and that's what Powell is reacting to here, is the uncertainty. So when he says it's the tariffs, he's not saying, well, the tariffs are doing this specifically or that specifically or having a direct impact, but he's talking about the trade war in general. I think for the most part, I think there's very little where he was referring directly to the tariffs. More, he's trying to paint this picture of, you know, there's a trade war happening, and he doesn't want to piss off Trump, because if he pisses off Trump, then he's in the hot seat. He's so far this presidency, you know, managed to avoid the hot seat. He did get in trouble with Trump last time they butted heads during his last presidency, and he as much as he can, he's gonna try and fly under the radar here. Yeah, I mean, he's playing it smart. I think he's playing it pretty smart here, and I think that the markets have been in trouble these last few weeks, and Powell, you know, had to do something to make them less in trouble. I mean, I think that he's probably a large part of the cause of this with their balance sheet unwinding. But you know, and at the same time as the trade war, but now he's saying, okay, well, trade war wins, we'll let that uncertainty take over, and we're gonna at least do what we can to alleviate some of that pressure, because the last thing that he wants is the markets to start crashing, because that could easily happen if they would like increase the you know, winding down the balance sheet. That would crash the markets, and you know, obviously he doesn't want that. So he's doing a very, very little amount to alleviate the pain of that and of the uncertainty of the tariffs. of the trade war.
And that makes, I think that makes every bit of sense. And it is like, honestly, this is one of the weirder times that he actually sounded more like emotional and empathic and seemingly compassionate with what he was trying to say, because I guess he sees how things have been going down the past few weeks. So it was almost like a different Powell, because a lot of times he's almost more mechanical and robot and doesn't really show a lot of emotion per se. But this was all like, you know, I know everybody's hurting and we're trying to do our best. And it's just kind of weird. He's still talking, isn't he?
Still talking. Chirp
Yeah,
out.
Rudy Havenstein with the tweet, your grocery bill is about past inflation. It's just fuck you, Powell. And you can see this huge line over here with the CPI. Like, okay, guys, your grocery bill is going to keep going up because that's always what it does. This is inflation right here.
That was a horrible statement by Powell. I know you just said he's been empathetic and all of that, but that right there, that was a horrible statement, Rice.
Yeah, and it reads wrong too. I know what he was trying to say.
Yeah, I know what he was trying to say.
He probably should have phrased it as, you know, inflation, you know, at the grocery store is a lagging indicator, which is what he was trying to say, is that like you're feeling the hurt of a few months ago with your grocery bill now, and therefore the economy now is better, and therefore you won't feel that as much at the grocery store next time. But the way he said it was disgusting, and Rudy calling him out on that.
Got on him quickly.
Spot on. Yeah,
your grocery bill's about past inflation. Yeah, that is pretty messed up.
Yeah, so grocery bill is past inflation because the price that you're paying now is a reflection of the goods that were bought a month ago. So that's why it's past inflation.
Right.
It's not in actuality like Blood
correct.
said, not really past. It's present for anybody who's experiencing you know, the grocery shopping.
See, that's that whole academia world,
Yeah.
Marty.
Ivory
You
Tower.
know, they live in a parallel universe. He's right, you know, from an academic perspective, but nobody wants to hear that shit, man.
Yeah,
we gotta. I mean, I'm for abolishing the Fed. I think it should never have existed to begin with.
Same.
Yeah, but I like, honestly.
Well, hey, speaking of that, I want to plug my most recent interview that I dropped on Monday with Mr. G. Edward Griffin, who wrote the book Preaching Jekyll Island. So people need to check that out.
Yeah.
You're freezing up, Blood.
So, huh?
You're freezing up. It's weird.
Freezing up?
Yeah, and your sound's going in and out.
Is doing a thing.
Why?
Yeah, it's weird. You're all choppy, and your sound's cutting a little bit in and out. You want to try talking again?
Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
Okay. Yeah, seems okay.
Sounded good.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. All right. There we go. When's the war on past inflation?
The war on past inflation. It's a national emergency. Let's declare it.
The war on past inflation. What we're gonna do is we're gonna
invent a time machine.
Proactively increase the interest rates. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna decrease the rates of February. Can we do that?
It's called It's called Titornomics, Rice. Titor, John Titor.
Oh, Titornomics. I like that. Like time traveling economics.
Quantum economics.
Oh, look at the way you wrap that around. Quantum economics.
Nice.
You want to go ahead and plug a little bit of quantum, some QE? You want to throw a little QE on us, sir?
Let's talk some QE, man. What's going on over there?
Oh, a lot of stuff. Yeah, we're building fast these days. Quantum economics is basically a startup foundry. We've got more than 100 members who are builders, mostly crypto, AI, and quantum, obviously. So fintech solutions, people who believe in a more free and fair world, more free and fair economy. Hat that I'm wearing is Quantum Expeditions. That's our Bitcoin mining arm of quantum economics. So far, we've raised more than $1 million from the general public. We've got a crowdfund closing on April 30th. Excellent opportunity to get involved at the ground floor of a Bitcoin mining company. We've got really great things planned within the next few months. We're moving to a natural gas site. So basically, taking natural gas that would have otherwise been flared into the environment and using it to mine Bitcoin. So greener solution, which is also much more profitable for us and for our shareholders. We're also building Cora Finance, which is a mobile app with an integrated AI. So that will help you manage your crypto, rebalance your portfolio, and especially for newbies who don't know a lot about DeFi, it is like an awesome thing to have an AI over your shoulder helping you with your wallet at every step of the way. This is our homepage, qe.finance. You'll see the button in the top middle says connect. Actually, that just went in last week. So we have a partnership with Unstoppable Domains, where you can produce a basically a top level domain. So anything that you want .quantum. So I have mati.quantum. That's going to be my login for this website now, along with my crypto wallet. So now if you want to send me money, you can send it to mati.quantum instead of, that long string of 0x blah, 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 blah. You just send it to mati.quantum, and you're not going to make any typos that way. You're going to see that it's the correct address. And in the future, it can even be used as a URL. So you're really like reserving your digital real estate by purchasing a .quantum domain. So there's a link on the left-hand side. You'll see a little key to purchase .quantum domains. We have the Quantum Alpha Club for those who are interested in the latest movements in the markets. What's the best trade right now? You can join that as well. There's a fire sale at the moment. It's only $25 for an entire year. So try and find a paid group that cheaply. And we've got some very brilliant minds in that group as well. Some excellent analysts in quantum economics. So yeah, that's a little bit of what we're working on. Obviously, hundreds of partnerships that are materializing and things that we're building all the time over here.
That's good to hear, man. That's awesome to hear that you guys got so much growth and stuff going on, man. Especially like during this time period and like what's been going on. Good time to build.
It's amazing, and Trump, everything that since the election day, not even the inauguration, since the election day, it has put wind in the sails of every single thing that we're doing, like massively. So even like, especially like the crypto mining is like, not only, are we talking about an administration that went from anti-crypto to pro-crypto overnight, we're also talking about an administration that went from anti-drilling to pro-drilling overnight. So it's like a
drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, it's a double whammy for quantum expeditions, and suddenly we're seeing like huge amounts of partners and investors, which is why we're closing the crowdfund, because we have so much institutional interest that and it was great opening it up for retail for a while, but we literally have people who are looking to invest millions, and we're not able to run both raises in tandem. So
well, you can send some of those our way if you need to send some millions my way and Blood's way. We'd accept it.
What?
Millions of dollars. You can have all your investors that need to send money to somebody, they can just send it to us.
I'll just explain to them that instead of investing their money, they should donate the money.
Yeah, that's exactly what they should
worry
do.
about returns. It's like, it's so simple.
What are we doing? Some USAID bullshit going on? What the hell?
I'm trying to get some funding for us.
Oh, we got to set up an NGO.
Okay,
you guys gotta get some.
This is off a tangent, but I thought this was interesting right here, Madi. X regains $44 billion valuation, which is the exact valuation he paid for when he bought it. Round of applause, man.
Oh, that's such a heartwarming tale.
You won't hear this on mainstream media. They're not gonna report this one.
I would be very surprised if you'll see any major headlines reporting that.
So that basically puts it like squared, even.
Yeah, he's broken even.
Yeah, nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And it's only been a few years.
Right. Right.
Interesting. It's going to be, it's going to be like the hands, his hands are going to be in a lot of parts of a lot of people's lives. Like I saw your stream last night talking about that robo taxi.
Yeah.
Considering he wants
Cybercab.
to do like the X payments, he wants to have like social media, like he wants to expand it. So it's like, it's almost as invasive as Google and how much hands that they have in our lives.
Sure. It seems like it's going to be that. But I can't say Google started off with good intentions because they were actually funded by the CIA. Did you know that?
A lot of these and strippers on the QE site. What does that mean? We don't have any strippers on our site.
Listen, this is a harsh crowd here.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to go with the flow.
Your audience is wild, guys. I'm sorry. This is it's very strange comments. I'm not used to seeing this.
Welcome to our viewers. Shout out to our family.
Yeah. So what were you saying, Rice?
I don't know. I guess this would be a good time for us to start wrapping things up. Marty did a great job explaining like what's going on with quantum economics and all the different ventures and growth and everything that's happening. What's been going on with your channel lately, man? Blood.
Oh, hey, just trading, man. Just trading. I've been trying to trade live every day. This past week, I started doing some coding live in PineScript on TradingView. So I've created I've taken the moon phases script and I'm modifying it. So we'll do some more modifying maybe tomorrow, and it's actually looking pretty good.
What are you trying to do with it? Like
it's just we're trading. So I'm basically entering trades on each moon phase. So if let me bring this up really quickly. So as of right now, where we've stopped with the moon phase script is essentially just going long if we have a waxing moon, and going short if we have a waning moon. So it is actually not too bad as far as the profit factor, almost at 2.
I will say,
weird.
Marty with advisors and such and people that have or currently are still involved with quantum economics deal with the astrology aspect too. There's a reason why that there is a moon indicator that already currently exists. Because
look at this, Rice. We if you would have purchased Bitcoin, this is the algo. You would have purchased it on the moon phase, on that last blood moon, you would be up right now. This version doesn't have a take profit, so you just basically reverse trade or go the opposite way once the next moon phase comes in. But like I said, I'm working on a version. Well, I've already coded a version that does take profit in your trade, but it's amazing. Pretty neat, man. Pretty neat. So we'll start we'll continue that on the next stream.
Were you saying earlier, and I meant to catch this when you're saying it, but were you saying that you think that the markets will swing back down regardless of
yeah. So I do think typically what I've noticed is that every FOMC meeting, just about whichever direction the market goes during Chair Powell's speech, it reverses the next day. So we'll see.
I was surprised that the blood moon didn't really have too much of an impact, honestly.
Well, we did. We went right. We started heading higher.
Yeah, well, but this is, and I did watch one of Waters Above's last videos, but he said he got some shit wrong. But I was kind of anticipating for the markets to go down because of the fact that it's a lunar eclipse. That he was saying
we're up 4.5% if you would have bought the blood moon.
It was almost but we dipped like a week before it. So I don't know if it was like if it was ahead of itself, the energy was ahead of itself, or what. It's not 100% science, but
I think that also we're just in a very wonky period right now with so much going on in so many different places. It's very And I think a lot of that's what Powell was really alluding to at the end of the day. He's saying, like, there's just so many moving pieces right now. We're not in a normal situation by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
And with all those type of things, and then you start saying, oh, blood moon, and like it really is just everything is pulling in different directions at the moment, which is why volatility is ruling the day.
Makes sense. I want to encourage people.
Anything else, Rice?
I want to encourage people to check out that G. Edward Griffin interview. The live stream I did yesterday, I encourage people to check out. I interviewed the founder of that antivirus project, and it was kind of I had a lot of concerns, a lot of red flags. I still don't know what to think. I'm going to continue doing a little bit of research and bring him back on for questions. But he stayed live with me for an hour and 20 minutes while I'm questioning things, and it says a lot. Someone could easily bounce. He explained, like, I thought that, and I got to do some homework on it. But it's a Solana token. They're using Radium, and it looked like if you go to their one of their team wallet addresses, which I had him confirm the address in the interview, it looks like that they're removing liquidity. But he's telling me they're part of the Radium earn and burn, which is a permanent lockup. Like, you have to permanently lock up your liquidity through the Radium earn and burn program. So I need to do a little homework on this. But it's an interesting interview. What I'll add to that is 2 weeks ago, and I said it in the video yesterday, and I got some really cool other interviews coming up. Dmitry Buterin, we're going to talk about mushrooms and Ukraine and Russia. I'm going to get David Morgan back on soon. I'm going to try to get him to get me in touch with David Webb, the author.
So you're basically back in the swing of things.
Somewhat.
Okay, round of applause.
Now, 2 weeks ago, Janice sent me this, and this is what I was telling you about before. This is one of John McAfee's scarf.
McAfee scarf. Okay.
See,
like, for real?
Yeah, and it's actually a Louis Vuitton too. It's really nice.
Styling over there, brother. Styling and profiling.
Stylish.
Yeah, she sent it to me like 2 weeks ago. And I thanked her for it and everything. It still wasn't going to stop me from finding out that this project isn't on the up and up, but yeah, it's an honor, man. It's really cool. It feels cool to have something that was around John McAfee.
Yeah, that's
around mine.
Wear it in good health.
Oh, I will.
And don't fuck any whales.
I don't plan on it, but I did think that the color of it because it's kind of a cream. I thought cocaine. I called it whale sperm color.
No,
there you go.
That's some good beige coke right there for you, brother.
Whale sperm.
Some tan. All right, ladies and gents, we're out of here. Make sure you guys follow us. And most of you are watching on X, so make sure you follow Rice. I've got his handle in the title on X, so just click that and follow.
Well, it's fun. It's in my name right here too. It's like really crazy. It's right there. It says at Rice.
Oh yeah, right there too. And I've got Maddie in my title as well. So go follow those guys. Follow me as well.
Mine's just at Monty Greenspan, so it's also there. Just remove the space and add the at. We're good.
There you go. There you go. All right, fellas, we're out of here.
Yo, it's crypto blood, Detroit flow, streaming from the D, knowing what to show, indicators are on point, OG since 12, invested in trade, living life like a pro, I'm Rucker, Jerry, it's just bloods do, bad motherfucker in a good way, boo, got my eyes on the charts, ain't no time to sleep. Get that money, gotta keep it creep. That's my crypto blood, Twisted Toasters on the line. Stacking my coin, got the market on my mind. Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum too. Cash is king, but I'm looking for a new move. I know the culture of the market, swipe the streets. Got my finger on the pulse, can't nobody beat. I see the trends, I see the flow. Got my strategies in place, you know.
Rice TVX, the mic slide wire. American Pitbull, real bold buyer.
Sound money advocate, rights defender. In the crypto arena, he's the top contender. From the gritty streets of the digital age, Rice lays wisdom, chapter and page. Silver, gold, he scores only the bold. Land, life, and liberty, these values hold. Constitution, deep dive, knowledge revival. Navigate the system, critical for survival. Rights engraved like inscriptions on metal. Pitbull in the game, lead foot on the pedal, foot on the pedal.